Greetings to you all. Thank you to the Official Monetary and Financial Institutions Forum for this opportunity. It is an honor to address you today and be part of such an important gathering. I'm always excited to see people come together to tackle an important and pressing issues before them. So I commend you for your presence here today. On the pressing issues, there is none more pressing and more urgent than the current dire state of our planet. We have reached a tipping point and a time when it is impossible to ignore that our planet is in crisis. Every day, we see tangible, real-life consequences of nature loss and climate change. Across the globe, regions are experiencing heat waves, severe droughts, food shortages, natural disasters, and more, all due in part to biodiversity loss. Animals and plant species populations in many parts of the world are being pushed beyond their adaptation limits. As ecosystem suffers, so do ecosystem services on which the society relies on. Since those services normally include climate and water cycle regulation, nature loss is unfortunately amplifying the effects of climate change. And climate change is not only the driver of nature loss, but look at deforestation, natural land conversion, pollution, proliferation of invasive alien species, all show that humans have altered over 97% of ecosystems worldwide, putting many of the resources we rely on at risk. This contributes to socio-economic tension in an already fragile global economy, amplifying inflation on major commodities and impacting the livelihood of millions of vulnerable people across the globe. Of course, everyone is affected by climate change and nature loss, but the poorer are most vulnerable, be it in wealthy countries or in developing countries where resilience on nature and ecosystem services is critical to millions for their economy and livelihood. That is why I'm not surprised when I read that the World Economic Forum, in its 2022 Global Risk Survey report, ranked biodiversity loss, climate change, and extreme weather among the top risks perceived by society today. By now, most of you are aware that corporate and financial assets are largely dependent on nature, causing material and physical and transition risks. Or with over 44 trillion US dollars of assets globally, or over half of the global GDP, is at risk from nature loss. However, the precise extent to which businesses and financial institutions rely on nature, impact nature, and are at risk from the loss of nature is still largely unknown or unaccounted for. But by not recognizing these issues, businesses fail to recognize the value provided by nature and the lack of understanding, anticipation, and management of the risks related to nature loss. This said, in recent years, there has been a surge of researchers, civil society organizations, and some businesses who have started to acknowledge the importance of nature-related dependencies, risks, and impact. As several major reports have highlighted in the past 2 years, including the panel of experts on resource mobilization mobilized by the Convention on Biological Diversity Secretariat in preparation for the 15th meeting of the Conference of the Parties to take place in December in Montreal, Canada. Vast public and private financial flows globally are being targeted to activities that directly harm biodiversity or apply insufficient safeguards to manage avoidable impacts on biodiversity. In 2019, major investment banks provided an estimated $2.6 trillion, approximately the entire GDP of the United Kingdom, into sectors that are primary drivers of biodiversity destruction. This needs to change. And so you ask, what can we do about it? There's a lot you can do. And I will prove to have positive effect on your business. On one hand, integrating biodiversity into decision-making will account for and manage risks related to nature-related dependencies and impacts. This will in turn improve prudential management and give comfort to asset owners and investors that their assets are being diligently handled and risks are being mitigated. On the other hand, protecting nature is a rich source of opportunity. According to the World Economic Forum again, shifting to nature-positive business models can generate more than $10 trillion in additional opportunities annually, and in fact support a creation of 350 million jobs by 2030. In order to get there, we must improve the consideration of nature in business-related decision-making. We often say that there are two ways to do this. The first one is through greening finance, ensuring that investments and economic activities duly take into account biodiversity impacts, risks, and dependencies, and use the best possible alternatives and mitigations to avoid harming nature. This includes the redirecting and repurposing of financial flows that are harmful to biodiversity and directing them towards activities that contribute to protecting and restoring nature. This requires a shift in business decisions and investor and investee engagement. It must include better consideration of nature-related risks and impacts to avoid, minimize, restore, regenerate, and where necessary, offset negative impacts to biodiversity. This also requires a thorough and systematic application of appropriate nature-related safeguards in the investment process so that negative impacts to ecosystems and biodiversity are avoided. Another important component may be termed as financing green. Financing green refers to the development and implementation of business strategies and mobilization of investment solutions that create positive impacts on nature. As an example, it could include investing in the protection and restoration of degraded habitat, whilst supporting activities that generate income and social development for communities in agriculture and forest sectors. They are increasingly referred to as nature-based solutions. According to the International Union for the Conservation of Nature and its Resources, nature-based solutions can provide 1/3 of climate mitigation needed to meet the goals of the Paris Agreement and $170 billion of global benefits in ecosystem services. Integrating biodiversity in business decisions requires an understanding of the risks and impacts caused by biodiversity loss to the organization. Measuring impacts to biodiversity at a given site is not always easy, but we know we have technically robust approaches for biodiversity loss and gain accounting at any given location. I am pleased to say that this is a fast evolving field, and metrics are now emerging to provide corporate-wide and portfolio-wide measures of exposure to biodiversity-related risks and impacts. We must support and encourage these approaches. They will help organizations make informed decisions on how they interact with biodiversity and how they rely on natural capital. We should also encourage reporting and disclosure of nature-related risks and impacts. As an executive secretary of the United Nations Convention on Biological Diversity Secretariat, I'm also honored to be the co-chair of the Task Force on Nature-Related Financial Disclosure, together with my colleague, Mr. David Craig, ensuring the link between financial and biodiversity communities. The Task Force on Nature-Related Financial Disclosure, or abbreviated TNFD, aim to deliver a global, science-based, market-led framework for reporting on nature-related risks, impacts, and opportunities. The TNFD is led by senior executives from leading corporate and financial institutions, supported by a forum of over 600 organizations from business and civil society, and endorsed by G7 and G20 countries. This is a market-led initiative supported by governments, philanthropic organizations, and highly reputable civil society organizations. Ultimately, the goal of the TNFD is to shift financial flows from nature negative to nature positive outcomes. As we work towards this shift, the TNFD is developing a practical framework currently being pilot tested for assessing and reporting on nature-related risks and impacts that are material to business organizations. I strongly encourage you to give attention to this initiative and join us in pilot testing it, and share your views and comments to enable us to further improve it before the final version is released in September next year. As well, with the Secretariat of the Convention on Biological Diversity, we are now busy preparing for the second part of the Conference of the Parties 15, which will take place, as I mentioned, here in Montreal, Canada, in December. This Conference of the Parties will be a critical moment in time. 196 parties to the Convention on Biological Diversity will have the responsibility of adopting an ambitious post-2020 global biodiversity framework to achieve a common vision of living in harmony with nature by 2050. In this framework, there are 4 long-term goals and some 20+ action targets to be achieved by 2030. One goal focuses on mobilization of resources, to a large extent, financial resources needed for the implementation of the framework to be able to achieve the long-term vision of the framework. While the precise wording remains to be agreed by the parties, this goal is reflected also at the level of action targets on the mobilization of financial flows to achieve positive outcomes for biodiversity. Other relevant targets include the integration of biodiversity within national policies and regulations, and the repurposing and alignment of financial flows that are harmful to biodiversity. To note, this second part of the Conference of the Parties include an ambitious engagement program with business and the financial sector. I would like to encourage you to join us and participate in this Conference of the Parties in December and support agreement by the parties on an ambitious post-2020 global biodiversity framework. It is critical that we work together using integrated approaches to align our vision, our agenda, and our actions on behalf and for the benefit of the people and of the planet. As asset owners and managers, you have a unique role to play. You have the power and influence to mainstream biodiversity within your business. You can align financial flows with our common vision of living in harmony with nature. You can also help to transform our economy to address the combined effect of nature loss and climate change and allow our society to strive on a healthy planet. I am certain you can make the changes needed. Thank you very much.